Wow, thank you. That was so much fun. Good morning. Welcome to Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship. I'm Reverend Paul Beckel. You'll notice I am maskless today. Please read in your midweek update and the announcements in today's order of service about our COVID task force's updated guidelines about vaccination, masking, and distancing in groups of 15 or less.
Hello, I'm Genia Allenschmidt.
What the dickens? You look so familiar. Are you a ghost from Sundays past?
Maybe.
Oh my.
No, I've been here the whole time.
Oh, so you know the whole nitty-gritty story?
I do. Let me share it. Notes from a Pandemic, Part 1, the timeline. March 9th, 2020, Reverend Paul heads out for a week-long ministerial retreat at the remote Holden Village to get away from it all. March 11th, Governor Inslee announces an upcoming statewide stay-at-home order due to the breakout of the coronavirus. March 12th, Kathy, Genia, and Kevin try frantically to reach Paul via Jane, explaining the breaking news and the need to shift to a Zoom service on Sunday. March 13th, Paul agrees via email to come up with an on-the-spot sermon while still not fully understanding the scope of the growing pandemic due to him being incommunicado with the outside world. March 14th, Paul returns to civilization and the realities of the pandemic. BUF staff and tech crews spend hours figuring out how to stream a service from the sanctuary. Social distancing isn't a thing yet, and no one wears masks, just lots of hand sanitizer. March 15th, a skeleton crew meets in the sanctuary to film the service on Zoom. March 16th, BUF staff holds an emergency meeting in the war room, the conference room, delegating tasks to execute while the church is shut down for a couple of weeks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Walt Ellis, and I've recently joined the team at BUF as the Zoom host. I moved from Washington, D.C. to Bellingham 3 years ago to attend Western Washington University, where I study international business and Chinese. I'm new to Bellingham and to BUF, but not to Unitarian Universalism. I joined my home congregation of Cedar Lane in Bethesda, Maryland, 8 years ago, and I'm very grateful to have found this community at BUF to continue my journey. I'm thankful to all those who have supported and welcomed me so far, and I look forward to meeting more of you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amaya Koblenz. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a student also over at Western Washington University. I'm a desert girl at heart. I was raised in northern New Mexico amongst the cacti and the roadrunners. But when I graduated high school, my heart ached for the trees and the ocean, so I moved up here to attend Western last fall. I grew up in the Unitarian Church of Los Alamos, New Mexico, taught about the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and encouraged for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And then when I graduated high school, I continued my path in Unitarian Universalism. In high school, I served as a district chair on my youth adult committee in the Mountain Desert District and wanted to continue that when I graduated. So I came to Bellingham and became involved in BUF last fall. The college transition during a pandemic has been incredibly difficult, to say the least, but I'm so incredibly grateful to be forming roots in BUF and this community. Without further ado, we have a chalice lighting by the author Atticus Palmer. We call this light before us in hope that we may always remain a strong community, working together to make the world a better place.
When we are grieving or sad, when we are challenged, when we need help,
This flame will guide us out of darkness. When we are cheerful, when we celebrate, when we accomplish a great task, when we return to a place that makes us happy.
the chalice reminds us to share our happiness with others. Please join me now in reciting our covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service gives it life. Celebrating our diversity and joined by a quest for truth, we work for peace and honor all creation. This is our covenant.
Good morning. I'm Melanie Reek. About a year ago, after we had to close the sanctuary doors, I was, like everyone, in a state of shock. But BUF did not fall apart. We adapted right away. Kevin, Andrea, and I sat at our pianos in our homes with our Yeti mics and laptops and special cables, and we covered all the expected musical aspects in the worship service. Paul, sometimes helped by his cat, lit this chalice and gave the sermons. Then, after a few Zoom services, a clear realization dawned on me. I am in grief over something specific, and that was playing the hymns live for the congregation and hearing everyone sing. Although today is my third Sunday back in the sanctuary, at this point, I have to imagine all of you out there in Zoom land, and I still cannot actually hear you sing. I'd like to share an article I found recently from the Mayo Clinic on the topic of coronavirus grief. I share it because it articulates my experience very accurately, and it might for some of you as well. Here it is. Grief might cause you to feel numb or empty, angry, or unable to feel joy or sadness. You might also have physical symptoms, such as trouble sleeping or eating too much, excess fatigue, muscle weakness, or shakiness. You might have nightmares or socially withdraw. Keep in mind, however, that grief can also have some positive effects. For example, you might feel grateful for brave and caring people in your community. You might have an increased appreciation for your relationships and have a desire to help others who are experiencing similar losses. As awful as it might feel, grief serves an important purpose. Grief helps you recognize that you've experienced a loss and that you're going to need to adapt. I feel that I did adapt because there was a structure in place for me to continue to offer music and to remotely and safely connect with BUF folks on a weekly basis. On the Sundays I was not playing piano, I would listen to the service, sing out with a loud voice, and stick around for the virtual coffee hour. And we did start having virtual choir rehearsals as well. All this was made possible by the commitment of Paul and Kevin and their brilliant team of volunteer tech wizards who kept building their skills in order to meet the technical challenges week after week. The BUF team, as well as the Geek Squad, advised me on how to solve my own technical issues. Wow, did it ever take patience, faith, and goodwill and generosity on everyone's part to make this conversion to a virtual church. And I do believe we are stronger for it, both as individuals and in community. There's a hymn, if Kevin will play for me, that I feel captures what has sustained us all. I invite you to join in singing hymn number 18, What Wondrous Love Is This, O My Soul. What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this that brings my heart such bliss and takes away the pain of my soul, and takes away the pain of my soul. When I was sinking down, sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down beneath my sorrow's ground, friends to me gathered round. Oh my soul, oh my soul, friends to me gathered round. Oh my soul. To love and to all friends I will sing, I will sing. To love and to all friends I will sing. To love and to all friends, for pain and sorrow meant, with thanks unto the end, I will sing, I will sing. With thanks unto the end, I will sing.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Tessie Mandeville, community minister here at BUF and leader of our first Monday of the month Taizé service. Though I do not lead it alone, I am joined by keyboard artist Andre Arakel, my partner Lisa Heesen, singer and songwriter, Stephanie Rains, watercolor artist, Roy McLeod, who hosts us over Zoom, Kai Rappaport, and our new Walt Ellis also have helped make Taizé happen. And just like our Sunday services, we've been hosting Taizé over Zoom for over a year. And of course, when the pandemic reached us, none of us could have imagined how it would all unfold or how long it would last. But every month, We join together, we sing, we pray, we meditate by candlelight. And in that spirit, I invite you to join me for our embracing meditation. Settle in a little more comfortably, breathe deeply, try and relax your shoulders. Soften your gaze and close your eyes if that is comfortable for you. Breathe out anxiety. Breathe in calm and peace. And let us be together for a brief time of meditation and prayer. And now, gently, I'd like to bring you into the mood of the reflections that folks are sharing this morning. Consider with me just some of the questions that our staff have been sitting with in preparing their reflections this morning. How was I unlike myself under these conditions? How was I like myself? Or even more? What will I try to do differently going forward? How did I grow in my appreciation of BUF? What limits did I discover in myself and in BUF? What capacities did I discover in myself and in BUF? And now, as a beloved community, we pause to remember the joys and concerns and milestones that have happened. I invite you to type your joy, your concern, your milestone into the chat window, and I will read it aloud, sharing it with the community as we hold it together in our sacred circle. We have joy for all the staff together on the stage. We have more friends and social connections now. We think about a brother-in-law, David, who is having back surgery on Friday. Looking forward to joining BUF in person again and selling free trade coffee. We send healing thoughts for a youngest daughter who was just diagnosed with shingles. And we hold Brother Doug as he struggles with rage and anger associated with his abusive childhood. And share excitement that a daughter just got her first job. A best friend having spinal tap procedure on Monday to relieve pressure in her system due to COVID. We bring into this circle of concern a brother who's been in ICU here in Bellingham since a week ago. We also name exhaustion and tired from negotiating a year of the ups and downs and twists and turns of teaching in a pandemic. And yet we hold gratitude for hearing all of our voices. Grief and concern over one who hasn't seen her 102-year-old father in California for over a year and a half. One who is feeling such joy at watching us all on the stage together, expressing all our feelings. And we send healing thoughts to a brother, Seth, who's recuperating from back surgery in Rhode Island. One amongst us used part of this time to create a welcoming place in her garden, and she looks forward to welcoming many of us to come and rest, reflect, and enjoy it. And 24 days to retirement. And a heart of gratitude for the consistency and care from BUF through it all. To each and all, according to their need, may wisdom and strength and healing flow from the Spirit of life this day and every day. Blessed be, and amen.
Thank you, Tessie. Part of what you did for me was help me slow down a little bit, so thank you for that too. I'm Sue Sayeg, and I have been your bookkeeper here for 10 years. I've been here as a member or friend a lot longer than that. So I have some reflections about both the COVID time and my time here altogether. But first I want to address the rumors of me retiring. And that was my husband that said 24 days until retirement. And that's his retirement. And so we are taking the time when he's getting a little COVID-inspired early retirement, and so it's time for me as well, so we can have the opportunity to go traveling and visiting and gallivanting and spending more time with his older parents in Florida. And so I needed to be free for that. But I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving BUF. We'll still be here. So during this COVID time, what I've missed the most is all of you. Being in the office, I will see some of you coming in through the office, but many are coming in for other reasons. You're visiting with Paul, or you're meeting with Genia, or you're meeting in the conference room, and I'll see you walk by, or you'll stop in and say hello. I'll introduce myself to people I haven't met yet, and I get that little connection that is a little different. It's a little quieter than after service, and so I've really appreciated that, and I've missed that. There's a lot that had to happen in the beginning of COVID in terms of changes constantly over the first several weeks, and not really knowing where things were going to land. But in the office, we did we were looking at me working from home. Instead, I would sneak in here after hours so that I wasn't here at the same time as other people, as other staff people, until we could figure out how to be near each other with masks. We were working really as, I felt like I was sneaking in as an essential worker, even though I wasn't exactly. But I was able to come in. It always felt safe here. It always felt COVID safe. And I know the reason for that is that Paul and the COVID task force and the UUA and everyone working in the first few weeks trying to make things ahead of the curve with what was happening with COVID. And I always appreciated that I could come here and do my work and feel completely supported and safe. In spite of being here on my own most of the time, and overlap for an hour or so with Kathy once a week or so, you did stay connected with me through emails. There's a lot of emails back and forth, some phone calls. I really appreciated that. I think it was easier for me than for most of the rest of the staff here. Other than changing my schedule a little bit, most things stayed the same for me. I especially appreciated the attitude of everyone on staff. And it was the attitude of, yes, this is hard. Yes, this is new. We have to figure out what's going on. We're making mistakes along the way, but let's do this. We're going to do this. And that attitude just helped carry me through. It's been 30 years since I first came to BUF. Dawn had to drag me kicking and screaming to get here because I had, at 16, declared that I was never going to step foot in a church again. I think I got in on a technicality that this was a fellowship and not a church. And it took me a long time to really commit to it. Took me 14 years to become a member. I don't make decisions easily or quickly. When I do, I'm all in. I'm fully in. There's been a lot of changes over the course of these 30 years. I've seen 7 ministers and interim ministers in that time. I've seen everybody on staff turn over except for Melanie. But the essence of BUF has always stayed the same. It's always been there, the essence of we are here for each other. We are here to support each other is the primary one that I step into. Social justice, we're here for social justice in many different forms and depths. We're here because we love great music. That's important to us. We're here because we enjoy each other's sense of humor. That's something that's important and essential for all of us to get through this and just our daily lives. And being a bookkeeper, I have to say that we've always had good fiscal judgment. We've always budgeted well and come through. And when things get a little rough, I always know that BUF is the members here, friends here are going to pick up and say, okay, what do we need to do to get through this? So that has never changed. I'm not leaving. I'll be out of the office, but I'm committed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. I'm Kevin Allen Schmid, the music director at BUF. As music director, COVID hit me straight in the gut. It wasn't fair that we couldn't have choir. It was that group singing was considered a public menace, a super spreader of the plague. I felt adrift not being able to sing with people or even to be with people. And aside from the cheerful presence of Kathy Watto, always working in the BUF office, weekends, nights, throughout COVID, the BUF building became like a tomb. It didn't help that my music office was a wreck of music piled everywhere, even on the floor. And much of that music came from Andy Backus and Ernie Hines, two BUF musicians who sadly passed away during COVID. Seeing the evidence of their extraordinary lives lying in boxes of beautiful printed music that nobody else wanted, it prompted some philosophical questioning on my part about what our lives come to after all. Recently, I've been sorting and filing in my office, trying to embrace the Swedish concept of death cleaning. Paring down my music collection is something I would certainly not be doing at this time if it weren't for COVID. In my office, I often feel lonely and restless, but early on I discovered a 3-gallon tub of vanilla ice cream in the freezer downstairs in the BUF kitchen. So whenever I'm here and I need a pick-me-up, I sneak down to the kitchen. And now it's like half a gallon. With the onset of the pandemic, I started doing as much work as possible from the couch at home. Sometimes I stayed in my bathrobe until the mid-afternoon. I embraced the Zoom technology for Wednesday night rehearsals because it connected us as people, even though what we were doing wasn't choir as we know it. Our living room started to look like a recording studio. But when we started rehearsing with Zoom, the BUF choir went from about 50-some weekly attendees down into the 30s. By New Year's, it was in the 20s. And this spring, it has got down into the teens. Clearly, people are just getting tired of trying to make music over Zoom. So it's my hope and my expectation that come September, we'll all be singing shoulder to shoulder here in the sanctuary, unmasked, as we love doing. Throughout COVID, the staff, the choir committee, the choir members, the whole congregation have been very kind and have responded to everything we've tried with enthusiasm and appreciation. This was already a lovely place to work before COVID, and I'm glad that I was able to keep the job. I can't imagine any music employment anywhere else being as fertile or as flexible as this. My job here is a half-time position. When COVID came along, it took 2 jobs away from me, directing the choir of the Salish Sea and substitute teaching at Lummi Nation School. So suddenly I had a lot of free time. I started playing the piano a lot and reading books again. I went on a building spree around the house. Started running like Forrest Gump, and I've been skiing more than ever in my life. To be outdoors so much with friends has actually made me quite happy during COVID, often even euphoric. The amount of privilege that I enjoy is stupefying, that I can get by on half-time work, that I have friends and endless access to nature, and best of all, that I'm married to Gina. Gina makes our home a refuge from the world. It's filled with love and laughter and energy and great food. So during COVID, Gina and I just snuggled in and watched Netflix. And we can't wait for the final episode of The Crown. Now I'd like us to sing hymn 165 in the Gray Hymn Book. The title is When Windows That Are Black and Cold, hymn 165. The lyrics of this hymn were written during wartime air raids in England. They evoke a yearning for the restoration of peace, like you might find in the silence of a night that's filled with moon and stars. I feel like COVID has been like wartime, and we've all been yearning to get past it. The setting of this tune by Rafe Vaughan Williams ends in anticipation without resolving the final chord. It holds open musically the thought that something beautiful, gentle, and meaningful is coming. We just wait for it. Hymn 165, When Windows That Are Black and Cold. When windows that are black and cold are lit anew with fires of gold, when dusk in quiet shall descend, and darkness come once more a friend, when wings pursue their proper flight, and bring not terror but delight, when clouds are innocent again, and hide no storms of deadly rain, and when the sky is swept of wars, and keeps but gentle moon and stars, that peaceful sky, that harmless air, how sweet the darkness there.
Good morning, Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship. I'm honored today to share my experiences of working at BUF during COVID. I was initially hired here as a building host at BUF, but I've enjoyed being part of BUF for several years now. It made sense to come to BUF after growing up in Hawaii on and off with the Unitarian church over there, and I'm grateful I could find BUF here. I'm grateful I was able to continue my work with BUF through COVID, and it has provided me with a good mix of independence and also guidance throughout this work in transition. I did not expect to be a Zoom host, and the skills I've learned have helped me in many situations as I find my school and many meetings are on Zoom. It has been a highlight of my time here in Bellingham to serve and learn and be in good company with you all during this time. I've never worked with such a good team and with different skill sets and personalities, but working together to produce clear as a service as we can with the limitations we have on Zoom. As an employee, I've felt completely supported, and beyond that, I've found ways to stay connected as restrictions have listed, but still following guidelines. This has ranged from walks to getting food and following up with what's going on in the community through BUF News. I felt like it was a little abrupt for me to leave when I did, but it was the right choice because recently I experienced the loss of a really good friend and roommate to suicide, and it shook me in my body and also spiritually. And I'm thankful for the many people here who helped me vent, give me space, and reach out during this time. It's been a unique experience that will help me be a better human being and nurse, and I will be living with that for many years to come. I encourage everyone, if they have the opportunity, to seek out help if they can and check in with your friends and loved ones. As always, it can be very difficult to access therapy in this town, and along the way I've learned of some resources and I'd be happy to share them. It has been this community, including those at BUF, who helped me navigate these challenges and celebrate the achievements I've made along the way. Because of the support I've gotten from many of the nurses here at BUF, including John and many others I'm forgetting, I'm soon graduating to become a RN, and I was selected to be a resident at the nursing residency program at Peace Health. I want to give a huge thank you to those many here at BUF that have helped me along this way, and I'm sure have extended that same care to all the people that they have touched. These include Kara, Kathy, Paul, Sue, Sky, Marion, Joan, and Lynn, now passed, and many more I'm forgetting. Thank you for all your support during this time. I I said I wish I could be doing this in person, but we are doing this in person. I just learned it, and it's a year since I've been in this building, and it's really nice to be with some of you. And I'm sure BUF will choose the right direction of where to go from now. And it's been a pleasure to be in this community, and I'm not leaving like Sue, but I look forward to keeping involved. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Liam Reynolds. Some of you may know me as the guy who makes the coffee, the little gremlin that cleans all the dishes, or maybe the strapping young lad who, hasn't you grown a lot since I last saw you? Who always moves the tables. Well, Kai moves a lot of tables too. Over this last year, there's been a lot of loss. I think that's a very common experience for all of us. Myself, I've dealt with the loss of family members and peers, being very disconnected from my friends, even members of my family, and a lot of the hobbies and experiences that really made me feel like a real person. And that's been very disconcerting. However, coming back to this building yesterday to clean up downstairs, because if you haven't been to the building for a while, it looks a bit different. I realized there was another loss that I hadn't been confronting. And walking around the social hall, I realized how much I missed hearing about your grandkids or what you were doing this weekend. And I thought about all the Sunday mornings that I spent making coffee and sitting in the social hall, telling people where the bathrooms were, helping you find napkins. And I realized how much that the community at BUF and hearing very, very small stories, little tidbits of your lives really meant to me. And I'm very excited for services to resume. I know that coffee hour is pretty high up on the risk list. And as I am a senior this year, I don't know if I will ever get to do another coffee hour. And that was a scary realization. But I'm not going to be very far away. And I hope to make it back for as many Sundays as I can and get to hear more about your various family members, kids, friends, skiing trips, what have you. Anything. I'm down. So, thank you for being such a friendly and sharing community for the 18-ish years that I've been here.
Hi, I'm Andrea Rackle, one of the pianists here. And I'm not gonna lie, the past year has been about a lot of vulnerability for me. I normally know myself to be a really resilient person, but the 6 months leading up to the shutdown was a perfect storm of stress in my life for a number of reasons. So when we went into lockdown, I was already really depleted. And when the pandemic hit, I hit rock bottom. And I really had this image of like being in the bottom of this enormous barrel and trying to climb out, and it was just impossible. And I gave up, and I just felt like sitting there and crying. But there were things that reminded me of who I am, like moments in a piano lesson where a kid really got it, or planting vegetables in my new garden, or learning and playing music for BUF every other Sunday. Of course, there were vulnerabilities here at BUF too with my job. First of all, in the beginning I thought, will I even be needed or wanted? And if I'm not, how will I make up the income that I'm gonna lose? And then when it became apparent that we were gonna try, I was wondering, is my sound even palatable out there on Zoom land? Am I reaching people? And you want me to lead singing? Ah, I was hired a pianist. But regardless of these limitations and vulnerabilities, many of you have told me that our music over Zoom is reaching you. And in the process of trying to reach you, I have reached myself. So I just want to say thank you for needing me to be me.
Hello, I'm Kathy Watto. I'm the administrator here at BUF. I'm not usually seen here at a Sunday service, so this is unusual for me, to say the least. I'm completely enjoying seeing all of the staff together here. It feels like a first. When last we were here all together, oh, that was that interesting week that Genia told us about. I don't know how many remember that week so clearly. The details that stick in my mind are wondering, will there be a community night dinner? And because community night dinners are prepped ahead, I want you to know that there wasn't a community night dinner that week, and we now have 2 frozen community night dinners in our big freezer downstairs, complete, including dessert, unless Kevin has been in those as well. Kevin is saying no, just the ice cream. It was a question about what would happen with the choir, and that was very intense. That was a very intense discussion, and a lot of discussion out in the hallway. And then Laura Lee McLeod, who is a retired nurse, I believe, was the one who settled the issue. And through Rory said, you know, it is not safe. This is not what we should be doing. It is not safe. And that's how that got settled, in Paul's absence, but in the confusion of the time. And I think it was a good decision, and I think the choir has adapted and carried on. And we see that they still know the path back to how they rehearsed and how they performed in the past. So while it adapted and while things won't exactly be the same, it continued. So we entered a period where Sue and I declared ourselves essential. I tried to work from home, and I still work from home, mostly with emails and reports and things like that. But basically, Sue and I split the day, or Sue would come in the evening, as she said, and that I would be here. And so I had the bubble at work, the bubble at BUF, and the bubble at home. So it was double bubble, and there we were in a fog of confusion. I imagine these bubbles all over the world. Nobody knowing really what was going to happen. All of us thinking, is it 2 weeks, 2 months? Is it 2 years? We didn't know. But there we were. And so this place was kind of creepy. All the people who called and said, how are you doing? Are you well? Thank you. All the people who dropped by. Humanitas was a regular visitor. People from Humanitas. So there were people who were coming, but most of the time it was creepy and silent in the first few months. And then people started to come back, and we started to fall into a habit, and the communication links were pretty strong, both with the phone and with email and with midweek update and order of service and all kinds of announcements. I think people could still feel connected, and of course the Zoom meetings. Really, we could see faces, we could hear people talk. So I think that really helped sustain things, and I know that what I came to appreciate was how helpful and kind and wise and supportive you, the members of BUF, the members of the fellowship, were during this time. Concern for other people's health and safety, concern for how things were at the church. Does someone need to come in and mow the lawn? Does someone need help with this? There was just this real engagement around that was just so strong and fulfilling. And it made me aware that you can always count on BUFsters. Sue said this too. In fact, she told me early on in my employment here that she straightened me out about how things would happen at BUF. We had, usually the service was not, well, there'd be Paul or Kevin, there would be senior staff at the service, but twice a year, Paul informed me in my first year, in the summer, I would be expected to be the BUF staff person here for Sunday service, which I was appalled to hear, and I, get extremely anxious, try to pretend I'm not anxious, but I was very anxious about the idea that I would come in on a Sunday and what if something went wrong? And I expressed this to Sue years ago. This was, maybe in my first 6 months here, and Sue said, you don't ever have to worry. BUFster people know, BUF knows what to do. Everybody knows what to do. If something doesn't go right, everybody will pitch in, they'll make it right. You are completely supported when you do this. Everybody knows what to do, and they won't let it fail. And I thought, wow, I hope that's true. Well, it was true, and it's been true just about every day since when something comes up. And this is, I know Sue and I talk about it, people come through. People are steady. And so all through the trauma of this time, not just a pandemic, but remember that election. And remember the craziness that followed the election. And remember the homeless issues. And we see them here right at BUF. We see people struggling with homelessness. And in a different way, I think, than before the pandemic. It's kind of hard to describe the difference, but it was so much more severe, so much more critical for some of the people on the street. And you may not know that there was a homeless person who, he was in the neighborhood in general, he was on our I Street porch, and for a while he was on our front porch, just before he died. And he was at death's door, homeless in this community, and people were trying to help him. but it was that tragic and that extreme. And that's something that I haven't seen before. In many, many years of providing services to homeless people, I haven't seen that level of need gone unmet. I think that, there were other things that happened during this time. I remember reading Paul saying, don't worry about BUF, folks. If you think it's getting dry and dusty and full of cobwebs, don't worry about it because Kathy's disinfecting and sanitizing. Well, we were the first month or two, but we didn't really have any staff time. Now we have staff time a little bit, but they're working on special projects and trying to take care of some things that we couldn't normally do that we can now because of no services or activities in BUF. So, now there's a lot to do to bring it back to that normal time. We know where we were a year ago, and we know that we're slowly moving towards reopening. And we know that our bubbles have been in fog and in confusion, and I don't think when they come back to home, I don't think it's going to look exactly the same. I don't think it's going to be the same place that you may have left in some way at the beginning of the pandemic. The adaptations, the changes, some of them will be good and some of them will take even more getting used to. But I think it's true of us personally, and I think it's true of our lives, and I think it's true of BUF. But I will come back to what I thought and learned here all along. The people who make up BUF are wise and kind and humorous and indomitable, and they will be the center of BUF when it reopens in the fall. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. And all of you. I don't think I can look at you because, I've been kind of weeping this whole time. I am so grateful to you. Despite my shtick at the beginning of the service with Genia, I have been very conscious that the staff have been here this whole time working beside me, and not just through logistical trial and error, but through a lot of upset and discouragement and grieving. Personally, during this time, I have found myself often impatient through a lot of hurry up and wait, and hurry up and wait. And in the midst of that, I found myself cutting off conversations and simply saying, this is the way we're going to do it. And there have been plenty of times that I've had difficulty maintaining my enthusiasm. So I've been very grateful for the staff for taking me and each other as just one more piece of the puzzle that has been a very puzzling year. So, my dear congregation, thank you all for being here today and throughout this year, and for continuing to honor the work that your staff have done and will continue to do in service to the mission that we share with all of you. And staff, thank you. Please know that you have been my support and you continue to have my support. And I know the congregation, too, will remember all that you've done this year. And even though there is no predictable ending point to this, we want you to sustain yourselves. That's what we all want for each other, and that's what the congregation wants for us. We are very fortunate to have one another. And I'd like to invite you all to now continue to contribute generously. You have been in so many different ways beyond financially in all the years that I have been here and long before I got here. Please continue to contribute to the mission that we work on together to become beloved community. Right now you'll have the opportunity to do that through the website, buf.org, through the phone app, Give Plus, or by mailing us a check. Thank you again for all that you do.
Notes from a Pandemic, Part 2, The Home Front. A week before the lockdown, I finally got the art in our living room up on the wall, just so, and I really liked the feng shui. Who knew that a week later, it would turn into a music recording studio filled with a tangle of cords and lights and microphones and stacks of hymnals, and be that way for over a year. Early in the pandemic, Kevin would move things around in the living room for his choir rehearsal on Wednesday nights. Meanwhile, I'd set up for children's chapel in our back bedroom, where I led art projects and cooking lessons. The bedroom, a strange venue for joys and concerns and whipping up lemon mousse. Thursday mornings, Kevin and I would carefully move all the plants back to the front window and rehang the art, then repeat the process for Sunday morning. Eventually, we said to heck with the ambiance, and Kevin's backdrop became a blank wall with an occasional plant. Our living room and guest room became our offices, and I learned to vacuum and do laundry in between bouts of email and Zoom meetings. Over time, the vacuuming and laundry diminished as it became clear that no one was gonna see the mess anyway, and I kept on wearing the same pair of jeans and sweatshirt day after day anyhow. Eventually, the line between BUF work and housework became so blurred, I felt like I was doing neither justice. So in August, I joined Kathy back at BUF, reveling in my quiet, sunny office with good Zoom lighting and no dust bunnies to distract me. Kevin's going to be the voice of Genia for a minute.
In the first weeks of the lockdown, our daughter, an extrovert like me, sent a meme saying, "Introverts, put down your books. Go check on your extrovert friends. They are not okay." Staying away from people was definitely hard on me, but I am a problem solver and I relish change and challenge. That came in handy as I tried to figure out how to keep connections at BUF and my own personal life going while in lockdown. Ironically, these months of isolation ended up deepening many connections. To my BUF colleagues who worked as a team from day one, with the Children's Chapel group, which shared stories, music, and silliness every week, with teens and Noreen during coming of age, with the Widening the Circle group, with friends around our backyard fire pit for happy hour or a few games of mahjong bundled up like Arctic explorers, with family as we met at halfway points for picnics on the edge of tulip fields or potlucks under rain shelters, to the outdoors, which kept me sane. As much as I resented Zoom, I have to admit it allowed me to connect to people in new ways. I got to peek into people's kitchens, bedrooms, and backyards. I heard pet dogs barking and caught fleeting glimpses of cats. Zoom allowed a dozen kids to share bedtime story hours in pajamas, cuddled up on their beds, some on the other side of the country.
As I looked for creating new ways to foster connection, I learned to throw perfectionism to the wind and just go for it. Would people come to an online talent show and art recreation contest? Yes. Would people come to a drive-through love fest in a foot of snow? Not so much. But that was okay, as long as I kept trying. Human beings are resilient and creative. Our impulse to gather in community is strong. The biggest gift of this year is learning that even when the world is in lockdown, magical doors open up, and that nothing, not even a once-in-a-century pandemic, can keep us from each other.
Let's join together hymn number 407. If you got your hymn books at home, the words will appear on the screen, but we're going to sit at the welcome table. Let's sing that. We're going to sit at the welcome table. We're going to sit at the welcome table one of these days. Hallelujah. We're going to sit at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. All kinds of people around that table. All kinds of people around that table one of these days. Hallelujah. All kinds of people around that table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. No fancy style at the welcome table. No fancy style at the welcome table one of these days. Hallelujah. no fancy style at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days.
Kara and Kurt's businesses went out of business this year. Very, very sad result of lockdown. And their response has been to come up with new ways to use their space and to now have a business closing sale from which they will give BUF half of the proceeds. Kara and Kurt, thank you so much for the generosity. She writes, our Inn and Retreat Center, we have many items to sell ranging from large leather couch, armchairs, desks, to small, lovely lamps, new boxes of dishware and glasses. For any Buffster purchasing, half of your purchase will go to BUF. We are on Mount Baker Highway, about 12 minutes from BUF. More details in next week's midweek update. Which brings me to the midweek update, which you can sign up for on buff.org. And I hope that you will do so if you haven't found your way into BUF yet. It's been a little bit hard for us to do the one-on-one communications where we're always urging one another and explaining to one another how to become a part of things. Also, on buff.org, well, you find the midweek update, you'll also find the order of service where a lot more printed announcements will be. I want to mention just a few of them. We have been having an auction for the last few weeks online. Today, Sunday morning, we will be marking any item that has not received a bid half price. Today is the last day for bidding, and the auction closes online. The links are all there on buff.org. Closes online at 5. Statements will be mailed to all purchasers this evening. And you can pick up your stuff Monday through Wednesday from 4 to 6 right here at BUF with cash checks or credit cards. And if you can't pick up for your items within that time frame, contact auction@buff.org and we'll help you make other arrangements. Today at 1 o'clock is our annual congregational meeting on the same Zoom link that you're on now. So I hope that you will be with us at that meeting to elect our new board officers and to approve our upcoming budget for the 21-22 church year. It is so hard to remember what year it is and what year is coming. But I'm very, very happy and grateful to be able to say that our programs are continuing strong as ever in the coming year, thanks to your generosity. Let's see, you can also find the guidelines for, the new updated guidelines for masking and vaccination and all that on the midweek update and in the printed orders of service. So now as we extinguish our chalice, it is such a joy and also such a relief to be here with the staff. It's easy to get caught up in that ghost of Sundays past, and I have seen a vision today, ghosts of Sunday's future, and they bid us well. I'm really looking forward to, they show you all here, those of you who can make it back. They show people from all corners of the globe coming to join us on Zoom, because we'll still be on Zoom. And in the meantime, I encourage you to seek out and nurture and cherish the divine that lives within you, around you, and that works through you. And surround yourself, as I have done, with others who do the same. Blessed be. And we'll extinguish the chalice, and we'll gather around and circle around for freedom.